Be the right club. Be the right club today. Yes!
It's episode 3 of Be the Right Club Today podcast. Thanks very much for joining us for this episode. Hal, how are you doing?
I'm good, Jamie, and you?
I'm doing great. Weather's a little miserable in here in Houston right now, but that's great for our indoor academy here.
Yeah, it's nice and warm, and the lights are working good in here.
It's not raining in here, So talking about recent events in the world of golf, last week was a big one on the European Tour, or the DP World Tour, as it's now known, with Patrick Reed and Rory McIlroy winning. So what was your overall thoughts on last week?
There continues to be a lot of drama around Patrick Reed, and I thought the tee incident was blown a little bit out of proportion, I think, but all the things that led up to that is what made that stand out. Mm-hmm. And, Rory roared in, and then plus, the controversy of Patrick seeing his ball in the tree that he actually didn't go into. And that has really caught a lot of flack after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I feel bad that golf is enduring all of the drama that it's enduring right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've always loved the game and felt like the tour was great to Hal Sutton and many, many others.
Mm-hmm.
And, all of a sudden we've got it torn and people are, for and against now.
It's very divided right now.
Very divided.
Mm-hmm. And then on that, Rory's been quite a spokesman for the PGA Tour and the European Tour, kind of against Liv. So how difficult do you think it is for him to play under all that pressure and expectation?
I think it's a distraction for sure, because he's trying to be the leader and be the spokesman, and that has to take away from his golf game. But on the other hand, it could distract him to the point that he's not worried about the pressures. He's got an excuse as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So sometimes, if you're not so focused on the pressures of it, sometimes it helps.
Serves as a distraction and can maybe even motivate him to. He looked pretty fired up when he held that putt in the last.
I think he's carrying the world on his shoulders in terms of, the tour is the right tour, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that, and I want to be the leader of it, and I got to play like that, and I've also got to speak that too.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing a good job of it for sure.
Yeah.
He's a class act, in my opinion. He sure looks like a class act.
Yeah, he's very carries himself really well in all his interviews well.
Yeah,
and he gives his opinion in interviews, which a lot of players kind of shy away from now.
Yeah, well, he's a leader, so he's going to have to give an opinion.
Yeah.
So,
and to the Patrick Reed rules issues that seem to follow him in his career, how much of a problem do you think the rules of golf are in terms of the wording and the grey area that allows for Patrick to? He kind of put the onus on the rules official, saying, I just did what the rules official said. Whereas by the rules of golf, he said he was 100% sure that was his ball. How much of an issue there is the rules of golf in terms of not being black and white? Well,
when I was playing the tour, the easy things, it was easy for us to do. But, each one of us knew all the lateral water hazards and OB and all that sort of stuff. But when it became a question, it was always good to call the rules official and let them make the final decision, which took the gray area out of it and put the responsibility over on them. So I believe in using the rules officials where you can, but I don't know the full ins and outs of what happened, but it sounded like he knew. He said 100% it went into that tree.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you can know 100% that it went into that particular tree.
Yeah.
So he kind of left that on himself, you know, and anyway, if he'd have put the rules official totally responsible for it, he would have not known which tree it went in. So then he would have had to have gone back.
Yeah.
So he kind of altered it a little bit himself there by saying, I know it went in that tree.
Well, as always, with Patrick Reed, there's always going to be some controversy and drama. But fair play to Rory for pulling out that win and holding that putt in the last to take him over the line. But moving on to today's episode, we're really excited to have Andy Johnson from the Fried Egg joining us for an interview. What are you looking forward to discussing with him today?
Well, Andy Johnson, for all of y'all that don't know anything about the Fried Egg, I mean, he is huge into the architecture of golf courses, and he loves history, and in particular, a lot of the C.B. McDonald and Seth Raynor stuff. And, of course, I'm very interested in that because we're building Darmore Club, which is using the templates from C.B. McDonald and Seth Raynor. Mm-hmm. So I'm anxious to talk to him about architecture and how it affects players, both average players versus good players, and what in a golf course needs to be designed to where it's fair to the average player, but yet challenging for the really good player. Mm-hmm. And I want to hear his opinion on all that. In particular, I've never played great golf courses from the front tees or the average men's tees. Yeah. I've always played them from the back tees. So, I'm wondering what they really are like from the men's tees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know I listen to a lot of the Fried Egg stuff, and I know Andy and you maybe share similar thoughts about how the ball performs these days. So it'll be interesting to chat a little bit about that.
Yeah. And before we get out of this, I'm going to bring up this week they're at Pebble Beach, and Pebble Beach might be, in my opinion, one of the greatest golf courses in the world. And it's kind of gotten sandwiched on the tour to where it's probably the best golf course they play on the tour. Or if not, Riviera may be too. But it's just kind of gotten lackluster. This week, the next 2 weeks, they're playing for the big money tournaments. And the field is not quite as good this week. They're only playing there twice at Pebble Beach. So, and that's if you make the cut. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you only play it once. And I always loved playing Pebble Beach. It was just, if the good Lord came down today and said, Hal, you got 1 day left to play, I'd say, okay, I want the first tee time at Pebble Beach. And then after I finish, I want to run over Cypress Point and play.
That'd be a great day's golf.
That'd be a great day of golf.
But anyway, join us right after the break, and we'll have Andy Johnson here. This episode is brought to you by Holderness & Bourne. Let's talk about their polo shirts for a second. The fit and fabrics are one of my favourites out there, but Holderness & Bourne really changed the game with the collar on their shirts. You can really spot a Holderness & Bourne collar. It has premium interfacing, sewn-in collar stays, and an English cut that is modern but not too aggressive. Ultimately, what does that all mean? It means you look more polished and more put together. A great collar can frame your face and give you great posture. A great collar also stays sharp, especially in the heat of the summer as you sweat, or maybe you're sweating over those nervy 6-footers. Check them out at hbgolf.com and use code HAL15 for 15% off your next order. That's hbgolf.com. All right, episode 3, we have Andy Johnson joining us from the Fried Egg. Andy, how you doing?
Doing great. Just a pleasure to be on with you guys today.
So, Andy, I'm curious. Let's get started with, how did the Fried Egg come about?
I just decided one day to start writing, and it kind of took off from there. So it was, I wish there was more to it, but I always I thought I could do something cool in golf, and I wasn't good enough to play golf. So one of the things that after working for a while, I just started I was reading a lot, watching a lot of golf, playing a lot of golf, and I just kind of thought, wow, there's a space for something a little bit different. And with the podcast and written stuff, that was just a little bit different in terms of what we wrote about. Obviously, we write about professional golf, but writing about golf course architecture, there weren't a lot of people writing about golf architecture then. It carved out a nice little niche and has grown from there. So, really just what prompted starting it was a passion for golf and wanting to do something and work. If you have a job that you love the subject matter of, then it doesn't feel like work. So that's the trick of it, is having work not feel like work, right?
Exactly. We did the podcast last year, and one of the things that I really wanted to do was to complete the golfer. Everybody talks about golf swing all the time, golf swing, golf swing. And there's so much more to being a really good golfer than just your golf swing. If it was just golf swing, there'd be, everybody would have a perfect golf swing and everybody would look good and play good and all that sort of stuff. But there's a lot more to golf. And one of those things is the architecture of the golf course, how the golf course fits players. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on, is to talk about what makes a great golf course, what makes a good golf course for a average player, and what makes a good golf course for a great player. I was commenting to Jamie earlier, I played most of the major great golf courses in the United States, but I have never played them from the men's tees. So I don't know what makes a good golf course from the men's tees.
Yeah, I think in terms of a great golf course, one of the things, my favorite courses, there's a lot of different great golf courses, and they have a lot of different qualities, right? But the qualities of what make up my favorite golf courses is, a golf course that can challenge. And I think like a big thing that people get lost with is a hard golf course and a challenging golf course. A player like you can play a challenging golf course, and you could shoot 16 under par, but you can stand over a lot of shots and think, wow, I really got to hit a good shot here, versus a hard course, right? It's easy to make a golf course hard. So my favorite courses are the ones that are very challenging for really good players, your scratch or better player into tour pros, right? Where they have to really, like, it stimulates them. They feel like they have to get the ball into certain positions. And a great example of this is Augusta National, right? You need to be in certain positions, or else you could be in a perfect lie and know that you have a very, very, very difficult shot. But then those same courses that challenge the best players are still playable for the average player. They aren't just surrounded by bunkers. There's options to run the ball up. They're wide enough where, hey, I feel like I can hit this fairway. It's not just 25 yards wide, and if I hit like the best drive I hit on a day, I can hit the fairway, but there's space for me to play golf. And I think that's the big thing, is that I think I used to host a podcast with Jeff Ogilvy regularly, and he always talked about how Augusta was this, I think Augusta is a great example. If he tried to go shoot even par at Augusta, it'd be really easy for him to shoot even par. But then for him, if he tries to go shoot 66, that's when he shoots 76, and that quality, Augusta from the members' tees is pretty friendly, right? From that member tee box, it's not a course like, obviously you get on the greens, and I think that's where it really intimidates people, but getting to the green isn't necessarily a Herculean task for the average player, because that's where they struggle, the average golfer struggles so much. It's just, how big of a cone their balls are going. It's 220 yards, but they have, it's just sprayed right and left, right? That's where it gets really difficult for them to get to the green, right?
Well, slope has a lot to do with how Augusta plays.
Yeah.
Played there 18 or 20 times or whatever, and it was not friendly to me because I didn't quite hit the ball high enough. So I could give you a whole nother perspective from Augusta. I'd love to play Augusta when it wasn't tournament time, because I wonder if it's anything similar to tournament time. And because it can get out of control at Augusta if you get in the wrong place. You hit over the green on 15 and the pin's on the front left, you can just about, you better holler uncle, in other words.
How much more challenging was Augusta early in your? I play it with retro clubs a lot. And one of my takeaways when I played a course was just how hard it was to hit the ball high enough in some cases to hit greens. How much did equipment change Augusta in the sense of trajectory? Like, did it become easier to hit it high later, and that thus make it a little bit more manageable?
So, Andy, I can't answer that question because it's been 20-something years since I played there, and the equipment has changed since I quit playing the tour, basically.
Yeah.
I always struggled to hit the ball high enough at Augusta. I mean, they wrote an article, and I think I've told Jamie this before. My first 2 years on the tour, I played really, really well, and they wrote an article about me that said he'll never win Augusta because he doesn't hit the ball high enough. And I can tell you, I set out to try to prove them wrong and change the way I played, and it cost me about 10 years of my life to try to do that. And I was always on top of the ball, and, I was limited as to how high I could hit it doing that. And the minute I started trying to hang back a little bit and change low point and everything, I didn't play as well for a while. And, I let a guy pushing a pen or a pencil, which is, I guess, what you like to do, change my opinion of the way I needed to play. And, and I try to tell kids today, don't let what someone else says affect the journey that you're on, basically, because they don't know all of what you're going through. And, until everybody's informed, they can't actually throw an educated opinion at you.
Now that makes sense. I imagine too that so much has changed with instruction with TrackMan, because it seems like everybody knows, the numbers don't lie now versus, I remember when I was a kid, instruction was like, we're going to take a video of you, and it's like, you need to swing more like this picture, and it wasn't based off of these numbers. And now everybody seems to have their swing kind of optimized. I was at Pebble yesterday, and I was talking to a guy who was showing me, when I have a wind off the left, I put my TrackMan down and I swing this way in order to make, it's all numbers based versus it's just, I think that's obviously a big part of instruction too that's changed so much.
Well, definitely numbers have changed things, but what I try to say, the ball's telling you the same thing. If you'll pay attention to the numbers and pay attention to what the ball is doing, then you have something to relate it to whenever you get out on the golf course. So much of the time, the youth of today are so locked in on the numbers and the data that they want to see the numbers before the ball ever hits the ground.
Yeah.
And, the ball's telling you the same thing. So let the numbers relate to what the ball is doing. And I think you get more out of it that way.
Yeah. That's it's an interesting. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm always I'm kind of somebody that goes out and sees stuff. But it's a compelling change, obviously, with all the technology. But I always think that TrackMan's the one that everybody talks about, the driver, the ball. TrackMan's kind of right there with it in terms of nobody's searching as much as they used to for what the magic recipe is for a great golf swing, right?
So for you gents, I know you kind of share maybe a similar viewpoint, and then how for you, talking about the ball nowadays compared to the ball back when you played, how much is that affecting how golf courses play at a tour level? Well,
I mean, when it comes to what Andy writes about and talks about all the time, I mean, golf courses have gotten so much longer. This has cost the consumer billions of dollars for the policeman to go to sleep, which is USGA and R&A. And I don't mind telling you, the average golfer has paid for this in the long run in multiple different ways. Whether it was redesigning their own course at home, whether it was buying new drivers every time they come out with one, because if you don't read the fine print, it's telling you you're going to get 10 more yards, but down in the fine print, it says if you've got over 100 miles an hour of swing speed, which most people don't. Let's be honest. People are in the whole world right now. There's a slight deviation from the truth, and they're selling based on that. And, and we're all hopeful. Every golfer out there is hopeful that they will get 10 more yards. They want 10 more yards. And, so the ball changed a lot. I lost all my speed whenever I started having all these joint replacements. So I can't tell you what it did to Hal Sutton. I mean, my hips did this to Hal Sutton, and the ball hadn't made up the difference.
Do you remember you played the Top Flight Strata, right? The Strata when it came out. That was I as I remember, that was a landmark golf ball. One of the first solid core. Do you remember a distinct, because I think you won the Players with that, if I recall.
Yeah.
I
won
do you
several
remember?
tournaments with it.
Yeah, do you remember a distinct change when you switched to that ball from, say, a Bellata or Professional, at the time?
Well, I thought the ball was really, really consistent. And, I could maneuver the ball. It spun. One of the things that I talk about a lot on here, Andy, is if the ball spun a little bit more, the game would be more interesting. The hardest shot in the game whenever I played was a 115-yard shot into a 20-mile-an-hour wind that had a forced carry, because I'm trying to keep the ball down and keep it from not spinning. I'll give you an exact example of that. 15 at Augusta when you laid up.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a really hard shot, because if the pin got on the front of the green, you wanted to get it close, but you could not chance it. And then if you tried to hit it to the back and spin it really hard, once it got started spinning hard, it was going all the way into the water. So, how you flighted that ball made a big difference. I mean, actually, to be honest with you, Willie Wood's dad, he was worried to death about it. I know Willie real well. And Willie's dad said, well, it's simple. He said, just hit it a little bit fat, just a tiny bit fat. I always
little
thought that
chunk
was
and
pretty
run.
funny.
That's I think that's the thing, is that some of the artistry, obviously, a lot of the artistry is gone. In terms of, I was talking to a young player on tour who I've gotten to know well yesterday at the range, and he's like, listen, like the topic of the ball, the rollback came up, and he's like, I just try and hit the ball straight. That's all I try and do, and that's like, I don't think that was the case 20 years ago. And obviously, I sound like I'm dating myself about talking about 20 years ago, but I remember, as a kid, you just worried, like, everybody had a shot shape. There were very few people that just hit a dead straight ball, 25 years ago. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how little spin there is. I mean, like, it's crazy, because the harder you swing, you used to worry about, like, if I swing hard, I'm going to spin this ball and I might hit this, like, floaty high cut. And now it's just like, if I swing hard, it's going to go far and straight.
Right.
It's but then, in terms of golf courses, obviously with equipment, just how long golf courses are. You talked about clubs and everything, like redesigning courses. Day-to-day maintenance bills are way higher, because there's just more space that these guys have to maintain. And when you're building a golf course like you are in Texas, you just have to, the tee disparity from front tee to back tee is so far. I mean, you're talking 5,000 yards to 7,200 yards. And, if you think about courses, the way that, they used to be, is like, a forward tee player hits the ball about the same distance as they did 30 years ago. It's the back tee player who's gotten all the advantage of this technology. Like, that's the crazy thing to me, is that my dad, who's, very average golfer, still has the same swing speed, and he hits as far now as he did, he hits a little bit shorter, but he never got the huge gains. That's the thing that's the shame, is that all this technology has really benefited, the top 1% of golfers.
You just made my point. I mean, the fine print tells it all, I mean, but anyway, I want to get back to something. You've used this word a couple of times, artistry. Golf is art. It's not science. But we're trying, I mean, I'm not trying to, but the world has been trying to make it more of a scientific endeavor. And, the game was more fun to watch when it was artistry. When a guy like Seve Ballesteros had one wedge, a 56 degree, and he could make it look like 5 different wedges. Now guys carry 4 different wedges so that they can accomplish the same thing. And, I just, when the ball curved, when we had to worry about it spinning too much, like you talked about, there was more artistry in the game at that point. And, it's almost insensitive in a way. It's you don't have to be sensitive to other things like we had to be. And I'm not trying to say, I used to hate it when an older guy would say something about how life used to be or how golf used to be or all that sort of stuff. But I don't think golf has ever changed as much as it has over the last 20 years. Do you think so?
I'd agree. I think one of the things you're talking about art, right? And a lot of the great art comes when there's a lot of constraints, right? You think about like the best art in the world is often produced by people with no money in like in a studio apartment, right. A band that's playing out of their garage, right. Some of the most iconic forms of art happen when that happens. And really, when you think about what equipment's done, you're talking about Seve with the wedges, right? One wedge, all these different shots. Well, that's because he only had one wedge. There weren't all these wedges then. And, the constraints of only having one wedge forced him to learn how to hit all these different shots, right? Golf, I always think about, the thing I think about the most is like, man, how good would Rory be if the driver wasn't super easy to hit and everybody could keep up with him, And I think about like the great players of today's era, how they aren't as great as they should be because the equipment's helping average players keep up with them. And I think that's the thing, is it's blurring the talent disparity. And that's a bad thing for the product of golf. You should want the superstars of the sport to stand out even more than they do. Because you think about what even like hybrids and these now driving irons have done is like, I'll never forget the first time I saw Tiger hit a long iron in 97 and hit that just towering long iron. And that was like, I always think that the greatest like skill is the ability to hit that towering long iron. And now, they don't ever have to hit long irons, but nobody even has long irons in the bag because they have these they have hybrids and utility irons that just launch it high on its own. That's not a talent anymore. Well,
we could talk all day about that because I 100% agree with you on that. I think that the equipment has closed the gap between the average player and the great player. And it's not that the great player came back to him, it's the average player moved closer to him. And, so tell me from an architecture standpoint, who's your favorite designer, architect, and what's your favorite course? I'm just curious.
I would say, I mean, it's hard. It's like picking your favorite kid, right? But in terms of my favorite, I'll go dead architect. It's a little bit harder to talk about living ones, right? But I'd say my favorite architect is Alistair McKenzie. I think, obviously he had so many great golf courses. You could make an argument that he built the best golf course in America, Australia, and Europe, which is pretty crazy, and South America. So, it's like I don't think any other architect can make a claim of building the best golf course on 4 different continents. But, in terms of favorite course, it's hard to say any course is I enjoy playing more than Cypress Point. I've been lucky to get out there a couple times, and just the whole, one of the things about there is I don't think you can have a bad day out there. You can't be in a bad mood because it's one of those things. But if you were talking about maybe more accessible golf course, like probably my favorite public golf course is a course built by 2 guys that work for Core and Crenshaw in Nebraska called Wild Horse. It's close to Sand Hills. It's in that same area, very remote, but the golf course is just wonderful. And one of the things about it that I love is it's under $100. So, anybody can go out and have like a world-class experience at that golf course. But Cypress Point, I think, the thing that I love about Cypress Point. Everybody always focuses in on 15 and 16, obviously, and 17. Those holes out on the ocean that are just some of the most spectacular holes in all of golf. But what I love about it the most is the cadence of the round, right? You start by the ocean. You see the ocean, and then the golf course takes you away from the ocean. And you go back and you play through the Monterey Forest, which is just spectacular, beautiful, trees and in these sand dunes. And then you come back out, and you come back out on 8, and you're on top of a dune, and you see the ocean again. And it reminds you, oh, I'm going back over there. You see some other holes that you're going to see later, and it takes you kind of back. And I just like that journey of kind of showing you, bringing you back through these other parts that are really interesting parts of the golf course that do not get enough love. Like the inland holes of Cypress Point are unbelievable and some of my favorite holes in all of golf. But then it brings you out, and it's got that kind of that build, right? It keeps teasing you with the ocean before it brings you back out for the spectacular finish with 15, 16, 17.
And then you get to 18.
I kind of like 18. I'm a defender of 18. Everybody hates 18. The one thing I can say about it is it the best hole in the world? No, but you got to get back to the clubhouse somehow. And
well, I mean, I've probably played 100 rounds at Cypress Point. I was lucky enough to be on the '81 Walker Cup team when we played there, and then I played a lot before in the AT&T before they ever took it out of the rotation. One of my favorite golf courses in the world, no doubt, because of the very reasons that you just talked about. You go in the forest, go into the sand dunes, but see the ocean. You kind of go back into the forest just a little bit, and then you head back out into the ocean. And I mean, if there were 17 holes of golf, I would say that Cypress would be probably the best golf course in the world. But 18 ruined it all for me, basically. And they were too close to the clubhouse in order to make 15, 16, and 17. And
I always wonder if you played the hole kind of where the clubhouse is down to the left of the clubhouse, if you're looking from AT&T, if you kind of played it down to the left where there's, space, if it would be better. I don't know. My defense is that there isn't like a tee shot out there where you like really have to execute a shot. It's the one tee shot. It's in terms of variety. It's the one tee shot. You have to hit it like a certain yardage. It's not my favorite hole. The one defense I can make of it is that it's wildly different than other holes and wildly different tee shot. It forces you to execute a really good tee shot there.
So what do you hit off the tee there?
Like a 3-iron usually. Try and just like hit it into. I mean, you got to hit it like it's so awkward because you got to hit it over to the left side, and you can't skirt it up right. I've hit some hit some where I'm like, oh, that's perfect, and then you're blocked by the tree.
I think whenever I was playing, I always hit a 4 or 5 iron off the 18th tee, and I never thought that was correct. You get to the 18th hole, everybody says, "What do you have?" Well, everybody's got a 5 iron. Everybody can hit a 5 iron. So, but anyway, so
I wonder if they got to build that back tee. How the original at one point there was a plan to build like a suspension bridge back to like on top of one of those rocks, have a tee box. How much different it would be?
Quite a bit, because you do have to hit it in a certain area.
And it would add 40 yards, right?
In that certain area. So talk about CB McDonald and Seth Raynor for me.
So I grew up in a town, Lake Bluff. My family wasn't a member of the club, but I grew up playing at the municipal, but the great course in town was Shore Acres, which is Seth Raynor design. And a buddy of mine and I would, we were teenage kids, we figured out ways to sneak out to Shore Acres on Mondays regularly, and we would get out there when the club was closed and play around. But Seth Raynor, It had a big impact on my life because, I knew the other courses in town and I knew there was something special. At the time, I didn't know that much about architecture, but I knew there was something different about Shore Acres. And I think, CB McDonald, obviously, he's like really, you could call him the grandfather of golf in America. He's, played arguably the first rounds. I think there's a big battle in every city about what the first golf course in America was, but I think CB McDonald, without a doubt, was one of the the driving forces of golf in America. Obviously, very heavily involved with the founding of the USGA. Chicago Golf Club was first design, but really he changed golf architecture with National Golf Links of America. So when that golf course was built on Long Island, that's really what you could say launched what people call the golden age of golf design. And from the late 1900s through really like 1930 up to the Great Depression, that's when a lot of the greatest golf courses in America were built. And the big influence was CB McDonald going over to Scotland, Ireland, and really studying his favorite golf holes. He had been over there before. He had gotten to know old Tom Morris during his younger years, but he went back over and he looked at all of his favorite holes and he brought those concepts back to America. So, holes such as everybody talks about these template holes that they built. What they were is really looking at the greatest holes in the UK and studying what made them great, the strategy behind what made them great, and reinterpreting them on different pieces of land. So, everybody, you'll hear a lot with him, the Redan hole. That's a par 3 with a green that slopes away and angled, and you have an angular hazard. It's a timeless design. It's a long iron. It's supposed to be a long iron shot. And the whole idea of it is that you have to aim away from the flag to hit it close. Just a really cool par 3. One of the sneaky things about the hole, and this is where architecture is really interesting. If you just understand what's going on, you understand where to leave it. On a Redan hole, you have this intimidating bunker. You have a green that slopes away, and you have an opening in the front, and it looks like, hey, I should leave the ball up front. In most cases, leaving short right or missing short is always a great thing. For a Dan hole, that you're going to have a really tough pitch over a false front to a green that runs away. You don't want to be there. You want to be long. That's the best spot because then you're chipping back up. So, he took these holes that had, timeless strategy, iconic holes, and that's what makes, I think there were more creative architects than Seth Rayner. But one of the things was that there was very few architects that designed, basically no bad golf courses. And, the reason that you never build a bad golf course if you're using template architecture is because the strategies are iconic strategies of golf. So, these are the best holes in the world reinterpreted on unique pieces of land. And when you have that just strong foundation of strategy, it's really hard to build a poor golf course. So that's the thing with the Raynor golf courses, the McDonald golf courses, is they're always founded in really great strategy. And one of the things that's super fun about them is seeing how they adapted these templates to different unique pieces of ground.
Well, a lot of people don't know this, but I know you do. The reason why Alistair McKenzie got to design Cypress Point is because Seth Rayner passed away before he could get out there. They had contracted with Seth Rayner to build Cypress Point.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you know that, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Seth Rayner, it'd be interesting where he would have gotten to with golf architecture and how many courses, what courses had he not passed away, and what happens with, the what if game, right? If Rayner doesn't pass away and he designs Cypress Point, who ends up being the architect at Augusta National? Is it Donald Ross? Obviously, Bobby Jones was a big fan of what McKenzie did at Pasatiempo and Cypress. So it's
Right.
it's all this world of what if. And Seth Rayner, I mean, one of the unique things about Seth Rayner, he was just an engineer. He didn't play golf before he started. He worked for McDonald at National Golf Links because McDonald needed an engineer. So that's how Rayner, you talk about, I think one of the compelling things is if you take a golfer, as we think about this from like a golfer perspective, right? If you take a golfer who's never played and you put them in the right situation, they never learn bad habits, right? A lot of like what kills golfers is bad habits that they can't break, right? So Seth Raynor learned his architecture from CB McDonald. He didn't have a concept of what a golf course was until they built National Golf Links of America, which is arguably, you could put it right there in the bucket of Cypress Point, the greatest golf course in America, right?
Right.
And so he didn't have any bad habits. He learned golf architecture. Golf architecture in America before National Golf Links was it was called the Victorian era. The whole idea was very penal. It was hit it here or else. Seth Raynor learned like you could hit it here, and that might be good for this pin over here. But then the next day, when the pin moves over here, you might want to be over here. And that's the type of architecture that Seth Raynor, that was all he knew, because he didn't play golf. And he learned from the courses they were building, which at the time were the best new golf courses in America.
So we mentioned slope earlier. As a player that spent my life in this game, severe slope is pretty easy because everybody in the room knows what it's fixing to do. It's the gentle slopes that are harder to read, in my opinion. Do you find the same thing to be true now that you've studied architecture?
I think so. I think that's something I actually, as to tie in here, like one of the things with Raynor courses, they have some big slopes, right? They have big slopes on the green. But then when you get in the pockets of where the big slope leads to, I feel like it's a very gentle slope. And one of the things I always think that some of the hardest putts is when you have a 10-footer, and it's like, is this left edge? Is it just outside? And you're having to deal with that doubt, right? Because it's harder to read, and then your mind gets going. Like, am I right? That's the trickiest thing, right? With golf is convincing yourself whenever you can get some doubt in a player's mind. I think that's when you really have interesting architecture, when they're thinking, am I doing the right thing? And in order to do that, you need to have some options. It has to present, hey, I could hit one of 3 shots or sorry.
Bless you.
Or if you're on a green, is this the right read? So, yeah, anything that introduces doubt, in my mind, is a really good feature of a golf course.
Well, I'll tell you this. In my mind, if I didn't make a clear decision on what I was about to do, usually it didn't turn out very good. Indecision is a killer in golf. And so, for all the young players out there, I would say be decisive. Even if it's the wrong thing, even if it's the wrong club, hit it like it's the right club.
I used to always struggle. It's funny how much you learn as you get older. And I played amateur golf, nothing crazy, but your state and state am stuff. And I always used to struggle. I'd get uncomfortable over tee shots, and then one day I was just like, like this tee shot, if there's water right, OB left, like if you don't make your best swing here, you're screwed. So I just started to say to myself, like, you just have to hit a really good golf shot here. And that's and it like really changed my life in terms of golf, because I get uncomfortable and I just say, you just have to make your best swing of the day, and it became a lot easier because you were decisive. It's like that whole thing. But really great golf design can introduce that doubt and get players thinking. And Pete Dye always talked about that. As soon as you get the players thinking, that's when you really won.
I always really liked Pete Dye golf courses because they were point A to point B to point C. That's the way he designed them, and it wasn't power. It was play it to here, then play it to there. Who can do that the best? And, modern day architects. Let's talk about that. Who's your favorite modern day architect?
I think it'd be either Tom Doak or Bill Corr and Ben Crenshaw. I think those two have built, some just unbelievable golf courses. The Core Crenshaw portfolio with Sandhills, Tom Doak's golf courses, I think are great too. I think they're really different. I think I'm into funky greens. I really like, greens that have stuff going on that, what I like is I like wider golf courses that then have greens that really change how you want to play based off of where the pins are. So a lot of Tom's courses, I think, have that, like where the green, if you walk the golf course from the green back, you look at the green before you ever play the course, you understand, okay, when the pin's here, this is the best spot. When the pin's here, this is the best spot. But then obviously, like, those are the two guys that really changed the game in terms of building a little bit more natural golf, where it's a little bit less manufactured, but also really, I think that what thrived is the playability, where there's enough space, and it was really designed for, it was more designed for the average player with enough going on to confound the better player. And I think that strategy is designing for 99% of the golfers rather than the 1%. And both of them work for Pete Dye. And I think Pete Dye, the thing that, doesn't get talked about enough is how Pete Dye's dedication to time on site and really construction, the way he built golf courses, really spurred on this era of design that we're in now. And, one of the things back to Pete Dye that I love is how he uses diagonals, where when you're on a tee shot, you see a very aggressive line, and then it gets more and more conservative. But the way he does it with that diagonal, it kind of creates, you have to hit the right line and the right distance. And I think that was, versus when you have kind of bunker right, bunker left in a straight fairway, you hit it straight. With Pete Dye, he kind of introduced the idea of you have to hit it straight on your line, but also the right distance.
So he built a lot of cape holes. So if you understand the templates, then which you do, that most of his were cape holes, basically.
Yeah, exactly. He, it's, just the idea, the cape hole is really famous for hitting over water. I mean, Mid-Ocean's fifth hole is the most famous cape hole in golf or National Golf Links. To an island, the name of it is kind of an island surrounded by a hazard. So it looks like it's a floating peninsula, the island, the green. And it can be done with bunkers, it can be done with water, but it's kind of like this diagonal tee shot a lot of times where you can just pick how much you want to bite off, right? Some of them are drivable. It's just it's a fun golf hole.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Andy, I know I'm from Scotland originally. How was your trip? I know you went to Scotland for the first time last summer. What takeaways did you take from Scotland that maybe changed your thoughts a little bit on architecture, or maybe confirmed some of your already assumptions?
I think, there's a lot of things. I think obviously the soils and, with it, the way the golf courses are kept out there, the firmness and the speed of the golf courses, it makes for such more interesting golf when the ball's bouncing and rolling, right? When the ball just hits and stops, golf is a little bit less interesting. And I think obviously the maintenance out there is one of the things. It's a lot, there are a lot less inputs into the grass, and just the way the golf is maintained out there really gets the most out of the architecture, because when the ball bounces, architecture is much more relevant. The other thing I think that stuck with me is everybody likes these big contours, dramatic contours on a golf course, like the idea of like hitting over something. But what makes a lot of the really great golf out there, whether it's North Berwick, whether it's the Old Course, whether it's Ely, whether it's Muirfield, is the size of the contours are much smaller. They're, they might go up to your chest. And it's those little rolling roll-ups that the ball pinballs off of here and there, and that the slope's small enough that your ball hangs on a side hill lie a little bit. That creates all this, you hit a shot, and then the adventure starts when the ball hits the ground. Where's it going to end up? Oh, I got up here, and I've got this side hill lie, and I got to get it. I got to hit it to the left pin, and the ball's below my feet, and that's just such a hard shot to hit. Like, that's the little stuff out there when the contours are smaller. A great example of this is Prairie Dunes in which outside of Hutchinson, Kansas. They have a couple big dramatic holes, but a lot of the holes navigate these like small little bumps, and you get on these little side hills, and the greens, the way they orient, it's just really hard to, that's the thing. It's not driving range golf out there. That's one of the biggest takeaways. It's like, oh, I know I hit my 7 on 175 yards. It is from a flat lie. That's out there between the wind, the way you got to land the ball short of greens. You're never hitting a stock shot.
So you just described the difference between American players and European players when it comes to Ryder Cup. We don't have a lot of imagination in America because you don't have to, because it is driving range golf. It is played in the air. It's not played on the ground. European players learned how to play the ground and the adventure, the journey of it. They knew how to hit the ground over here to make it go over there. Americans aim at the flag all the time. They aim where they want to go. And that is the difference in the Ryder Cup right there.
Yeah. I mean, it was fascinating at Whistling Straits, right? And it's something I just thought of with what you said is like Americans have all these long drivers of the golf ball. And that's kind of like a product of driving range golf. And then you think about what happened at Les Golf National and in France, and it was a golf course that I'm not a big fan of that golf course, but it required you to have some restraint, some control, and different things, and it was an un-American form of golf. That's one of the things that's really compelling about what's going on with the Ryder Cup is like who wins is the golf course is a big dictator of that, right? Like the Americans with the team they fielded in France had no chance versus the Europeans because they had so many more precise players and distance wasn't a huge advantage. But then you go to Whistling Straits where distance is an overwhelming advantage because you're able to, hit it. It's wide enough and you're able to take on so many more hazards and carry them easily with sheer distance. And the Americans just lapped them. So I'm not sure. I don't really know much about this year's Ryder Cup venue, but it seems like it might be a little bit more Americanized golf course. So we'll see what happens this year. But the Ryder Cup, I think one of the things I love about match play is that it makes golf a little bit more like tennis. Hell, in terms of match play, were there types of players that drove you nuts? Did you like playing against longer players where you're hitting approach shots first, or was the case of somebody hitting behind you? Were there types of players that drove you particularly nuts?
Well, I mean, what you just mentioned was my strategy when I beat Tiger at TPC. He was going to outdrive me all the way around the golf course, which to my advantage gave me the first shot into the green. So if I hit really good iron shots, I kept the pressure on Tiger that way. And that was my whole strategy. Okay, I don't care if he outdrives me on every hole. I want to make sure that I hit a good shot into the green so that the pressure's on him. So, yeah, that sort of thing does drive people a little bit, it bothers them.
How many more rivalries would we have on tour if say the tour played like 8 to 10 match play tournaments a year?
Quite a bit. To me, match play makes the game more fun, to be honest with you. To have to score, I spent my whole life having to put up a score. That's the way I made money. But, for the average player, if it was always a match play tournament, if they make a 7, they're not out of it. They don't lose their hope. On the tour, you make a big score, you kind of lose some hope. You're having to regroup and play for 10th or whatever, But match play's more fun, I think.
Was there a guy that you were like good friends with that you played a match against and you're like, man, what a son of a bitch that guy is?
Well, No, not really. I mean, I never played a lot of gambling matches. The first few years I was out there, we played quite a bit. But after that, everybody was trying to get off early on Tuesday and get in a quicker practice round. If you played later on Tuesday, it took all day to play. And, I wanted to go spend some time on the range too. So
you spoke to me a little bit about in Ryder Cups when you were up against Sevi, right?
Yeah.
He had a little bit of that in him, right?
Yeah, Sevi would definitely play some games with you. One day in '99 in the Ryder Cup, it was Jeff Maggart and I against Jose and Jimenez. And Jimenez was out of the hole, and so was Jeff Maggart. It was on the fifth hole. And both Jose and I hit it about 5 or 6 feet. And so we're marking our balls. And, I mean, he's clearly more out than I am by maybe 4 or 5 inches. But he's just to the left of my ball. And we're both spotting our ball at the same time. And he looks up at me and he says, good, good. And I look back at him and I said, I'm not afraid of missing mine. Are you afraid of missing yours? Let's putt them. And both of us made it. But, there was a little gamesmanship there,
Yeah. It's that's the thing with match play. I remember I was playing a state match play tournament, and I was up big on a guy. He made this run on me. He made a couple birdies in a row, and he hit it really close. I had like a 4-footer for par. He had like a 2-footer for birdie, and I made my par putt. And I made him make it. He missed it. Guy just spiraled out of control from there. He was so mad that I didn't give him the putt. The next hole I had like 3 inches. He made me putt it, and that's the beauty of match play. Is like little things like that. I always am amazed at how these guys get mad when they don't get given putts. It's like, what you putt everything out for a living.
Well, one of the things, I played a lot of match play as an amateur, and one of the things that I had as a strategy was on the first hole, if I was already finished and he had a 3 to 6 footer to tie me, I gave it to him. And the reason why I did it was because I wanted him thinking about all day long, I wonder if he's going to give me this putt or not. And just me doing that a lot of times made them think before they hit every putt, I wonder if he's going to give me this putt or not.
I feel like there's also like a thing with, I always liked rounds where I had like, I didn't like them if I missed it, but I always loved when I would have like a 5-footer on the first hole. I made the putt. Like seeing one go in early in the round and feeling like, oh, I'm going to make everything today. Like you get that like confidence. When you don't see it go in, there's always like that first tester putt. I feel like in a round of competitive golf is like it's just like, every putt counts the same, but it feels so important because it sets the tone for the rest of the day.
I totally agree with you. That was part of the strategy of that too, is they didn't get to see it go in. So they were wondering on the next one, well, would I have made that putt or would I not have made that putt? Well, this has been great.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's been super fun, and I'm a huge fan. And you'll have to come on our podcast one of these days.
Be happy to do it anytime. We love the fried egg. I look at it all the time. You've got great pictures of all the past golf courses on there and explanations and everything else. And one of the things you brought up that I totally agree with you is all the severe but smaller slopes. And if you saw that a lot in Scotland, they're on the edges of the greens, and the ball can either bounce away from the green or it can bounce more to the center of the green. And, one of the things that makes that really possible is that they're all built on sand. So the water goes all the way down. The golf courses stay firm all the time. And a la learning how to use the ground to maneuver the ball instead of just the curvature of the ball.
Yeah. It's the little contours make golf kind of come alive.
Yep. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
thanks,
Andy.
Hal.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah. Hal, that was a great conversation with Andy there. Really enjoyed that. What was your key takeaways from that?
Well, I loved all the old architecture stuff. You know, I really, I'm into that right now because of what we're doing out at Darmore Club. I love what he talked about with the slopes, when he went to Scotland, how they're somewhat severe, but they're smaller. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are on the edges of the greens because, they kicked you away from the green or they kicked you into the green. The punch bowl and all the different things that they developed over there. You get it in the right spot, it'll help divert the ball towards the hole, or it'll help push it away.
Yep.
So he talked about that on there.
Yep. The key takeaways, like for listeners out there, how can they, like, say they're playing tournaments or looking at playing a practice round, what kind of things can they do during that practice round to help them?
Well, one of the things that he mentioned a little bit on there, I'm going to take it a step further, was looking at the hole from the green backwards. Mm-hmm. He liked a lot of the architecture where that was taken into consideration. Hogan used to say that if you played a practice round and you didn't study the hole after you finished the hole from the green back to the fairway, then you had an incomplete practice round. You didn't really study the hole. Mm-hmm. And I always felt like he was right because there's different places that are advantageous to be in the fairway for certain pins. Mm-hmm. And knowing that in your practice round so that when the pin gets in a certain spot, you know where to hit it in the fairway.
Yep. And, if anyone out there is listening and really interested in doing a bit more research, Andy's website, thefriedegg.com, is really good. There's a lot of great stuff on there.
I study it all the time. I mean, from an architecture standpoint, I'm not sure that there's anything out there that has more information than that website does.
Yep. And then for us here at the Academy, check us out. We got the website, halsuttongolf.com. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube. Check us out. Come along, say hi. If you ever get any questions for us, drop us an email or a note. But thanks, Al. That was a great episode.
Yep. For everybody out there, hey, if you've got any questions, you want to know something, shoot us shoot some way. There's a lot of ways to reach us. Ask us the question. We'll try to get it back to you.
All right. We'll see you next time. Thank you.